Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. A very warm welcome to this Monday, 29th May 2023 morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam discussion. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 8, Text 6. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana, Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana, Gaura Hari, Jaya Nitai Sachinandana, Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana, Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacarya Shodra Shatashi Srimad, His Divine Grace Shila Isi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. नामाचार्य शिला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय, मथुरा धाम की जय, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय, मायापुर धाम की जय, गंगा माई की जय, यमुना माई की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu Krishne Matirastu. Hare Krishna. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 6. Dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. Dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. Dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. Synonyms: dhautātmā, whose heart has been cleansed; puruṣaḥ, the living being; Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead; pāda-mūlaṁ, the shelter of the lotus feet; na, never; muñcati, gives up; mukta, liberated; sarva, all; parikleśaḥ, of all miseries of life; pānthaḥ, the traveler; sva-śaraṇaṁ, in his own abode; yathā, as it were. Translation: a pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Kṛṣṇa, for they fully satisfy him, as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. One who is not a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Kṛṣṇa is not completely cleansed in the heart, but a perfectly cleansed person never quits the devotional service of the Lord. In discharging such devotional service, as ordered by Brahmaji to Narada in the preaching of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, sometimes a representative of the Lord engaged in preaching work meets various so-called difficulties. This was exhibited by Lord Nityananda when he delivered the two fallen souls, Jagai and Madhai. And similarly, Lord Jesus Christ was crucified by the non-believers. But such difficulties are very gladly suffered by the devotees in preaching, because in such activities, although apparently very severe, the devotees of the Lord feel transcendental pleasure because the Lord is satisfied. Prahlad Maharaj suffered greatly, but still he never forgot the lotus feet of the Lord. This is because a pure devotee of the Lord is so purified in his heart that he cannot leave the shelter of Lord Kṛṣṇa in any circumstances. There is no self-interest in such service. The progress of culturing knowledge by the Jnanis or the bodily gymnastics by the yogis are ultimately given up by the respective performers. But a devotee of the Lord cannot give up the service of the Lord, for he is ordered by his spiritual master. Pure devotees like Narada and Nityananda Prabhu take up the order of the spiritual master as the sustenance of life. They do not mind what comes of the future of their lives. They take the matter very seriously, as the order comes from the higher authority, from the representative of the Lord, or from the Lord himself. The example set herein is very appropriate. A traveler leaves home to search for wealth in far distant places, sometimes in the forest and sometimes on the ocean and sometimes on hilltops. Certainly, there are many troubles for the traveler when he is in such unknown places. But all such troubles are at once mitigated as soon as the sense of his family affection is remembered. And as soon as he returns home, he forgets all such troubles on the way. A pure devotee of the Lord is exactly in a family tie with the Lord. And therefore, he is undeterred in discharging his duty in a full affectionate tie with the Lord. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namashreshtham Manamapi Shachiputram Atra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupurim Mathurim Goshthavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Adadandastridandam Te Idam Yachaha Punah Punah Shriman Rupa Padam Bhojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabho Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 6. Dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Kṛṣṇa, for they fully satisfy him, as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. This is the verse spoken by Srila Parikshit Maharaj to Srila Shukadeva Goswami. We have to understand the verse just before this verse, where it says, Pravishta Karnarandrena Swanam Bhava Saroruham Dhunoti Shamalam Krishna Salilasya Yathā. So the verse before this, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 5. This is Text 6. In the Text 5, it is mentioned by Srila Parikshit Maharaj about how Pravishta Karnarandrena Swanam Bhava Saroruham. So in the previous verse, because we have to understand the Text 5 and Text 6 together. It is a continuation from Text 5. So in the Text 5, it is mentioned Pravishta Karnarandrena. So the holy names of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord and his wonderful devotees. So that is entering the heart of the person through the holes of the ears. So that is what is mentioned. Pravishta Karnarandrena. What is it entering? Swanam Bhava Saroruham. So the the holy names of the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord, it is full of bhava. And bhava is that experience of transcendental emotions that one experiences in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Svanam bhava saroruham dunoti shamalam Krishna salilasya yathā sharat. So, in that verse, in the previous verse, it is mentioned that when it is mentioned as the comparison given is that of the rain that is happening in the autumn season that cleanses all the dirt everywhere. So similarly, when the names, holy names of the Lord is entering the ears, and the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees are entering the ears, it is cleansing. Dunoti shamalam. So one gets cleansed of all the conditional state of existence. And one understands one's original position as an eternal part and parcel of Krishna. Mame vamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta Sanātana, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita. So this dhautātmā puruṣaḥ, then it is this verse. Pravishta karnarandrena svanam bhava saroruham dunoti shamalam Krishna salilasya yathā sharat. So that was the previous verse where it is mentioning that the holy names and the pastimes of the Lord is entering through the ears and cleansing a person from the conditioned state of existence. When that cleansing is happening, the metaphor given is that of when the rain is happening in the autumn season, it is cleansing everything. The rain is automatically cleansing everything. Now, after cleansed, what is happening? After the cleaning process, what is happening? That is what is mentioned in this particular verse. So, in this verse, it is mentioned, dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Krishna pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati. Once one is cleansed of all the conditioned state of existence, one is in a pure, loving devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Kṛṣṇa. And in that pure state of existence, the devotee does never give up the lotus feet of Krishna. So that is what is mentioned here. Dhautātmā. That state of existence of pure devotional service, where one is totally attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. Samashritaye padapallava plavam mahatpadam punyayesho murare. So there is samyak rupena ashrita, 100% dependence and surrender onto the lotus feet of the Lord. Samyak rupena ashrita. Samashritaye padapallava plavam. So the lotus feet of the Lord is considered as a boat or a ship that helps us to cross the ocean of birth and death. Padapallava plavam mahat padam punya yesho murare. So the transcendental glories of the Lord, the divine glories are in itself very pious. Punya shravana kirtana. Hridyantastohi abhadrani vidunoti suhritsitam. Shrinvatam sva-katha Krishna. So this dhautātmā, dunoti, it is mentioned in that verse as well. Shrinvatam sva-katha Krishna. So when one is hearing about Krishna, his name, his pastimes, his qualities, his entourage, everything related to Krishna. So hridyantastohi abhadrani vidunoti. Whatever is there, that is hard knot of material existence. That is what is called when one is in the conditioned state of existence, one is always thinking from the perspective of body, mind, and intelligence. One is not coming to the aspect of one's original existence. What is one's original existence? That is, as mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Achedyohem adahyohem makledyo ashoshe vacha nitya sarvagata sthanur achaloyam sanatana. That is what is our original existence. We cannot be cut by weapons. We cannot be burned by fire. We cannot be made wet by water. We cannot be dried by the wind. Eternally existing, nitya sarvagata, and the living entities are existing everywhere. Sthanur achaloyam sanatana. So that is the original constitutional position of all the living entities in this whole universe. That is, they are eternally, first of all, they are eternally existing. And then the second important part is they are eternally part and parcel of Krishna. So this is very clearly known to someone who is hearing the names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when one is focusing on this Mahamantra, Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and when one is focusing on hearing about the Lord and his transcendental divine pastimes and his devotees' divine pastimes, one is constantly associating with one's original existence. And in that original existence, one is so much attached to Krishna that automatically one gets detached from everything else. Bhakti para isha anubhava viraktir anyatra syat. Esha trisha ekakala. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that this loving devotional service to Krishna, which is bhakti, para isha anubhava, the experience of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, para isha anubhava, and viraktir anyatra syat, and automatic detachment from everything else. Esha trisha ekakala. All these things happen simultaneously. So when one has that loving devotional service to Krishna, automatically one experiences Krishna. And when one experiences Krishna, automatically one does not have taste for anything else. Viraktir anyatra syat. Prapadyamanasya yadashnutasya tushti pushti kshudapaya. So it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that when one has surrendered onto Krishna, that is bhakti. When there is bhakti, one experiences Krishna and one automatically detaches from everything that is not related to Krishna, directly related to Krishna. Everything is in the material world. There are nothing, in a sense, there is nothing that is not related to Krishna. Because everything is coming from Krishna. But then Krishna has got his internal energy and external energy. That is very important to understand. So the internal energy is antaranga shakti. And the internal energy of Krishna is what helps the living entity to become attached to the lotus feet of the Lord. That is antaranga shakti. And the external energy of Krishna, which is bahiranga shakti, is what makes the living entity think that this world of matter is real. One actually thinks that there is nothing other than sense enjoyment. There is nothing other than getting happiness through the interactions of the sense with the sense objects. So that is the external energy of Krishna, bahiranga shakti. So the living entity is between the internal and external energy of Krishna in the conditioned state of existence. So the conditioned state of existence is where the living entity has got a material body. Living entity is originally a spirit, undoubtedly. But when the living entity has got material body, and along with that the material mind, material intelligence, then it is a combination of matter and spirit. And that is called tatastha shakti. That is the marginal energy. So there is internal energy, external energy, and marginal energy. So the living entity in the conditioned state of existence in this material world is a marginal energy. What does it mean? Yeah, and that the word tatastha is really an interesting word. Tata means the seashore. So in the seashore, what is happening is sometimes the water from the sea is coming onto the shore and sometimes it is receding back. So so if we consider water as the spirit and the land as the matter, so sometimes the spiritual experience is coming and sometimes the spiritual experience is receding. So this is constantly happening. And this is what is the marginal energy. This is what is the situation of the living entities in this material world. Unfortunately, sometimes there are living entities who are totally, somehow or other, they are agnostic to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradhama maya pahrata jnana asuram bhavam ashrita. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that people who unfortunately have committed a lot of sinful activities, dushkriti, namam, so they are not prapadyante, they are not surrendering onto the Lord. Unless there is surrender to the Lord, one cannot experience the loving devotional service. Loving devotional service is experienced through surrender. It cannot. So that is what is samashritaye pada-pallava-plavam. So when one is totally surrendered onto the Lord's lotus feet, then it is taken as the ship that helps us. Mahat padam punyeshu murare bhavam buddhi vatsa padam param padam yat vipadam natesham. So the material world is like an ocean of birth and death, bhavam buddhi. It becomes like the water in the hoof print of a calf. Vatsa padam param padam yat vipadam natesham. So at every step in this material world, there is vipada, there is distress, there is misery. But for a person who has totally surrendered onto Krishna, there is no vipadam natesha. And that is the Vaikuntha. So vigata kuntha. Kuntha means anxiety. So in this material world, there is always anxiety. And this anxiety is present because one is unfortunately thinking that the body is the only part of my existence. And sometimes one might also go to the mind. One might understand that there is mind as well, and I have some thoughts in my mind, and the thoughts are going out of control, and because of that, someone is experiencing, unfortunately, depression and other things. So that is in the conditioned state of existence, one fully understands about the body because body is seen and body experiences everything. And one understands a little bit about mind also, because one knows that I'm not just this body, but I have my thoughts, and my thoughts are directing me to do different activities. So one understands this, but somehow one might understand that I have intelligence as well, because intelligence is something that is helping one to grasp things and do some actions. It is with intelligence, with mind and intelligence, that the body is doing actions. But somehow and this is where that agyata sukruti comes into picture. When one is doing some activities without knowing that they are pious activities. So kriti is activity, and sukriti is pious activities, and agyata is unknowingly. So if someone is doing unknowingly pious activities, that's how slowly they are coming out of this namam dushkritino mudha, coming out of this state of sinful activities. If unknowingly one is doing pious activity, how does one do unknowingly pious activity? Say if one is walking in the street and the devotees are chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So just by sanketya parihasam va sthoba helana evam va vaikuntha nama grahanam asheshaga haram vidhu. So this is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that If someone is hearing about the Lord, even unknowingly, without making a persistent effort, or actually, one is not knowingly in getting involved in devotional service, but unknowingly, if one is just going through the street and somehow one is hearing the names of the Lord, or one is through the senses, through the eyes, one is seeing uh, the Krishna book, or Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, or Bhagavad Gita, or any of those transcendental literatures. That is the person who are going like that, they are getting this unknown pious credit. The person is not knowing that they are generating the pious credit, but they are generating the pious credit. There is agyata sukriti. So when that is happening, then somehow or other, that the cleansing process has started. And when this cleansing process starts, the only goal is that the cleansing process will end and one will reach the destination. So that is, if you want to understand this verse, so dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Krishna pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati. So when one is cleansed, one is attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, and one does not leave the lotus feet of the Lord. Mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ. So what happens after that? After that, all the miseries of their life, parikleśaḥ, klesho adhikarastesham avyaktasakta chetasam, avyakto hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhir vapyate. So this klesha is mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita as well. So Krishna says that this one who is after the impersonal way of achieving liberation, their path is full of difficulties. Klesho adhikaras, lots and lots of difficulties. Tesham, what avyakta asakta chetasam, one who is attached to the impersonal philosophy. Avyakto hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhir avapyate. So Krishna mentions that because not only in the material world does one have body, but even in spiritual world. But in spiritual world, the body is spirit. It's not matter. The mind is spirit. Everything is spirit. So that is the difference between spiritual world and material world. In the spiritual world, because everything is spirit, there is no anxiety. The anxiety happens because of matter, the presence of matter, and this conglomeration that is happening between matter and spirit, which is like it is wonderful actually, how the matter and spirit are interlinking with each other in the material world. That is the wonderful play of the Lord. The Lord, it is inconceivable, achintyoyam. So all the when we think about this whole universe, there are unlimited galaxies. The science is trying to discover the galaxies, and the more the science discovers, the more science understands that how less we know. That is the vastness of this universe, and this is the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he is the Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the actual proprietor of all the universes. And when one knows that Krishna is the actual enjoyer of all the penances and sacrifices, bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram, that Krishna is the actual proprietor of the whole universes. Suhridam sarva bhutanam, and then Krishna is the best friend of all the living entities. Yathā mam shantim ruchyati. One attains real peace when one understands these three aspects. So that is mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ. One is getting free from all the miseries of life. How does one get free? Because one understands that this matter is changing, and that is not the real me. The real me is someone who is na jayate mriyate va kadachit, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita. Nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya ajo nityam shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So this is the original constitutional position of all the living entities in this whole universe, that they are eternal in the first place and then eternally linked to Krishna. And the last word, the last sentence in this verse, pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā, is actually quite an important part of understanding the whole verse. Pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā, the example or a metaphor given here is that of a traveler who is going to different places. And then finally, the traveler, after traveling to many places, is coming back to their own home. So that feeling that one experiences when one comes back to their home after traveling to different places, that feeling is indescribable. Even though one might enjoy the travel while going to different places, that enjoyment does not even compare an iota with the enjoyment that one has when one is situated back in one's own home. And that is the metaphor or synonym, that is a simile that is given here in order to understand how when one is when one surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one reaches one's original state of existence. So that is the simile that is given here. Dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. So when we look at Srila Prabhupada's statement here, Srila Prabhupada actually gives the example of Nityananda Prabhu, who delivered Jagai and Madhai, and also gives the example of Lord Jesus Christ, was crucified by non-believers. But such difficulties are very gladly suffered by the devotees in preaching, because in such activities, although apparently very severe, the devotees of the Lord feel transcendental pleasure because the Lord is satisfied. So this is the example given about pure devotional service. And Nityananda Prabhu and Lord Jesus Christ's example is given by Srila Prabhupada. And it is very significant to see here how we can understand that the real love for the Lord is irrespective of all the external religions that are present. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. This is very important to understand, that it does not matter what external religion one is following. So one might follow Christianity, one might follow Islam, one might follow so-called, one is calling Hindu religion, but actually it is Sanātana dharma. So it is actually the real duty of an eternal person, that is Sanātana dharma. So in that, when we are discussing about real devotional service, it is the definition is given in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. What is real devotional service? And that is not dependent on a particular external religion that one is following. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam says the real devotional service or the supreme occupational duty is yato bhaktir adhokshaje, is rendering loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, who cannot be seen by the blunt material eyes, who cannot be perceived by the blunt material senses, or the blunt mind, the material mind. So how can one actually see the Lord? When one anoints their eyes with the salve of love for the Lord. Premanjana chorita bhakti vilochanena. Then what happens is one is seeing the Lord always. Santas sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti. Where one is seeing the Lord? In the heart. And also, the presence of the Lord is felt everywhere, because, as Krishna says, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasya aham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, I am never lost to such a person, and such a person is never lost to me. That is the so one is actually seeing that everything is coming from the Lord. Aham sarvasya prabhu matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, when one knows that everything is coming from Krishna, aham sarvasya prabhu matta sarvam prabhu iti matva, when one knows this fully, in 100%, when one is in cognizance of this fact, what does one do? Bhajante mam. One renders loving devotional service to Krishna. And how does one do this? Bhava samanvita, with full emotional involvement. It is the emotional involvement that creates the reality. It is said in this personal growth aspects of the motivational leaders, who are there, all the famous motivational leaders. What they say is, when you have the thought, when you have the feeling, then the actions will correspond to those feelings, and then the results will come according to those actions that are performed. So it's so initially everything is coming from the thought. So the thought is like in the case of our spiritual understanding, if the thoughts are based on Krishna, one develops the feelings for Krishna. And when there is feelings for Krishna, one does actions for Krishna. And then the result is coming based on those actions that one has done for Krishna. And whatever action one does for Krishna, yagyartha karmana anyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. So when one is doing the actions for Krishna, then there is no the whole cycle of birth and death is happening, because one is getting attached to the actions. So when one does some action, one wants to get good results out of those actions. That attachment to good results from doing good actions is what causes one to come into this cycle of birth and death. So real activities are those activities which are done as an offering to the Lord. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjuhoshi dadasiyat yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kuruṣaḥ madarpanam. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that whatever activity you're doing, yat karoshi yadashnasi, whatever you're eating, yajjuhoshi dadasiyat. So whatever you're doing, tat kuruṣaḥ madarpanam. Whatever you're giving, Krishna says that you give it as an offering to me. So what happens when one does that? One gets freed from the result coming out of those actions, because it is the result of the actions that binds the living entities into the cycle of birth and death. One does one action with an expectation that I will have a better life in the current life or in the consequent subsequent lives. So with that, if one is doing the actions with that intention, then one is getting bound in the cycle of birth and death. But when one is doing the actions and saying that, oh Lord, this is an offering to you, I am not whatever the result, I am offering it as an act of love for you, then that is what is paro-dharma. Save pumsam paro-dharma, the supreme occupational duty. What is that? Yato bhakti. Well, the bhakti is, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Ma karma phaleheturbul mate sangotsva karmani. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. That all the living entities, so everyone has to do some activity. So without activity, one cannot survive. Even if one is in a state of total absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is still breathing. The heart is beating. All the involuntary activities are taking place, and those are also activities. So, therefore, there is one verse where Krishna says that without activity, one cannot exist. There is, and therefore there is this verse where Krishna says, "Niyatam karma kurutam karma jyayo hi akarmana." So Krishna says that na niragnir na chakriya anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karotiya sa sannyasi sa yogi cha na niragnir na chakriya. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that who is a real renunciant, sannyasi, one who is doing the activities without getting attached to the results of the activities. Anashrita karma phalam. So it's not that na niragnir na chakriya. It's not that someone who is not doing any activity or someone who is not cooking anything, for example, is a real renunciant. A real renunciant is someone who does all the activities, but does not get attached to the results. Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karotiya sa sannyasi sa yogi cha. That person is a real yogi. That person is a real renunciant who is doing the activities without being attached to the results of the activities. And that is what is when one is in the paro dharmo state, the supreme occupational duty, that is doing all the activities as an offering to the Lord without getting attached to the results of the activities. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yathā suprasidati. So it ahaituki, there is no hetu, so there is no cause. It is costless and apratihata. It cannot be checked under any circumstances. And yathā suprasidati, and it gives bliss that is inexplicable bliss. It is something that cannot be experienced when one is engaged in some material pursuit. The happiness that one gets from engaging in material pursuit is something that is fleeting. So therefore, na teshu ramate buddha adyantavanta kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha yahi sansparshaja bhoga dukkhayo yavate. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that whatever happiness that one experiences from the senses coming in touch with the sense objects, sansparshaja bhoga, it is actually it is a womb of sorrow, Krishna says. Why is it a womb of sorrow? Because by nature, one wants a bliss that is unending. And that is already present within. So, what is the reason one wants to experience the so-called happiness from the senses? Because one cannot experience the ever-existing bliss within. If one is situated within and experiencing the ever-existing bliss within, then one will never go out to experience the fleeting so-called happiness. So, and that is so therefore it is really important to understand that to be present with the experience of the Lord who is within the heart of all the living entities. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishta. So Krishna is present in the heart of all the living entities. So when one is focusing on being in the present moment and experiencing the bliss within, when one is in that state of existence, one will not have any hankering to experience the sense gratification. That is what Krishna says, Brahma bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kamshati. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. So, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatite tan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So there is this. First of all, one has to somehow or other develop this attachment to hearing about the Lord and engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses. Hrishikena hrishikesha sevana. That is the definition of bhakti. Devotional service. The first step in devotional service, as Sri Narada Muni mentions, is sarva upadhi vinirmukta. So first of all, one has to give up all the designations because it is the designations that makes one conditional. So the conditioned existence in this material world is because of attachment to designations. Immediately when one is born in a particular country, there is this designation that I am from this country. My parents are this. If there is brothers and sisters, they are they. So continuously there is adding of these designations based on this temporary body that one has got. So therefore, it is really important to take off all the designations, upadhi. So when one takes off all the designations, what remains is our original, eternal relationship with Krishna. That is tat paratvena nirmala. One becomes pure. The purity is seen when designations are removed. So all the designations are removed. Then what is the only designation left? Jivere swarupaya krishnera nityadas. So as it is mentioned in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the real swarupa, the original form of the living entity, is as an eternal servant of the Lord. And in that attitude of service, one can have different roles in that attitude of service. Dasya sakhya vatsalya madhurya. So one can be a servant of the Lord. One can become a friend of the Lord, sakhya. One can become a parent of the Lord, vatsalya, and one can become the lover of the Lord, madhurya. So all these wonderful relationships can be experienced in relationship with Krishna. And that is the summum bonum of human life. When one experiences, we see here when Srila Prabhupada mentions about Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj suffered greatly, but still he never forgot the lotus feet of the Lord. This is the wonderful state of pure devotees, where they take everything as the mercy of the Lord. Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanirasyopa prasanna chetaso hyaso buddhi paryavatishtate. So it is taken, everything is taken as a mercy, costless mercy of the Lord, by the pure devotees of the Lord. And in that state of existence, there is transcendental exchange of love between the Lord and his devotee. So here Srila Prabhupada continues, this is because the pure devotee of the Lord is so purified in his heart that he cannot leave the shelter of Lord Krishna in any circumstances. That is apratihata. Ahaituki apratihata. There is no self-interest in such service. So this is again doing, loving the Lord without any expectation. That is anyabhilashita shunyam. Jnana karma dhyānavritam. Anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. As it is mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami. So there is no other desire except to serve the Lord. So service is paramount. And that service is based on the remembering the Lord, rendering service to the Lord. So that is the 9 types of devotional service that Srila Prahlad Maharaj says. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnum, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. Iti Pumsarpita Vishnu, Bhakti Chetnava Lakshana, Kriyeta Bhagavati Adha, Tanmanye Aditam Uttamam. So Srila Prahlad Maharaj mentions the different ways of engaging in loving devotional service of Krishna, which starts with hearing, Shravanam. So when one is hearing about the Lord, then one can speak about the Lord, Kirtanam. When one hears and speaks about the Lord, then one can remember the Lord, Smaranam. Hears, speaks, and remembers the Lord, then one can say prayers to the Lord, Vandanam. Hears, speaks, remembers, and says prayers to the Lord, then one can offer flowers to the Lord, Archanam. Hears, speaks, remembers, offers prayers, and offers flowers to the Lord, then one becomes servant of the Lord, Dasyam. Hears, speaks, remembers, offers flowers, says prayers, becomes the servant of the Lord, then one can become the friend of the Lord, Sakhyam. And then the final is Atmanivedanam, total surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it is coming from Sri Narada Muni's statement. When one is giving up all the resignations, Tat Parat, when one becomes pure, then Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam. One is rendering service to the Lord through using the senses. To who is the Lord? The Lord is Hrishikesha, the master of the senses. So the real master of the senses is Krishna. The senses and everything else that exists, it exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead has created it. Otherwise, nothing exists. Without the creation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nothing is in existence. So that means when something is offered to the person who has created it, that is the natural state of existence of that particular thing. If it is used without offering to the Lord, then it is an unnatural state of existence. So that is bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatma karanat yagna shishta shinas santo muchyante sarva kilbishay bhunjate te tvagam papa ye pachantyatma karanat yat karoshi yadashnasi. So this is what Krishna says. Yagna shishta shinas santo muchyante sarva kilbishay. If one is doing all the activities as an offering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the sinful reactions are taken away. And one will not get even good reactions, because when one is attached to good reactions, again, there is cycle of birth and death. So there is no reactions. It is akarma. So akarma is that stream of consciousness or activities, that stream of activities done with a consciousness where one gives everything to the Lord. So one is doing the activity, but one is saying that, oh Lord, this is an offering to you. So then nothing is coming back in return, and therefore the cycle of birth and death is slowly stopped. If you look at the conclusion here from Srila Prabhupada says that all such troubles are at once mitigated as soon as the sense of his family affection is remembered, and as soon as he returns home, he forgets all such troubles on the way. A pure devotee of the Lord is exactly in a family tie with the Lord, and therefore he is undeterred in discharging his duty in a full affectionate tie with the Lord. So there is this beautiful verse, Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva, tvameva bandhuscha sakha tvameva, tvameva vidya dravinam tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. So this is the wonderful prayer of pure devotee of the Lord. So the pure devotee is saying that, oh Lord, you are my mother and father. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva. You are my bandhu and sakha. You are my relative and you are my friend. Tvameva vidya dravinam tvameva. You are my education and knowledge, and you are my wealth, and you are my everything, O Lord. So that is the state of pure devotional service. And this verse is a wonderful verse in that sense of understanding what the state of mind and what the consciousness of a pure devotee is. That is this: dhautātmā puruṣaḥ Kṛṣṇa, pāda-mūlaṁ na muñcati, mukta-sarva-parikleśaḥ, pānthaḥ sva-śaraṇaṁ yathā. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of the Lord, for they fully satisfy him, as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. With this, I would like to conclude our discussion today. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyata Deshatarine. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Krishne Materastu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.